These are the notes for 2-4, day 3, solving multi-step inequalities with fractions. Our goal is to eliminate these fractions, and to do so, we want to multiply the entire equation, that means every term, by the least common multiple so that the denominators cancel. I often use the acronym LCM to represent least common multiple. Okay, so we want to multiply every term, even if the term does not have a fraction. We still need to multiply that term by the least common multiple of the denominators in order to keep it an equivalent equation. Okay, so number 1, we want to solve by eliminating fractions, and then we'll graph the solution on a number line. So the first thing we want to determine is what is the least common multiple of the denominators. So the only denominator is 5, making that the least common multiple. So now we multiply every term by 5. And when you multiply a fraction times the value of the denominator, you end up with just the numerator. That's what cancels out the fraction. Negative 2x times 5 is negative 10x. Negative 9/5 times 5 is negative 9. And negative 29/5 times 5 is negative 29. So now we're left with a two-step inequality. So right now we're subtracting 9 from negative 10x. So we want to add that to both sides. So we're left with negative 10x is less than negative 20. We're multiplying the x term by negative 10, so we want to divide by negative 10. And it's dividing by the negative number that requires us to flip the inequality symbol. So it was less than, it's now going to flip to be greater than. It's open at 2. All values greater than, so we shade to the right. Okay, let's recap. First, we found the least common multiple of the denominators. Then multiplied every term times that value. We eliminated the fractions and then continued to solve. One strategy to find the least common multiple is to check the denominators and find the largest denominator and see if that number is a multiple of the other ones. So with number 2, the denominators are 2 and 6. And 6 is a multiple of 2, making the least common multiple 6. And I always write it out like this just to make sure I don't forget any terms. And I find it easier to multiply when we write it out. Okay, from here you could certainly use a calculator, or you can do it by hand by cross canceling. 6 over 2 is 3 over 1. So negative 1 times 3 is negative 3. 6 over 2, 3 over 1. Negative 3 times 3 is negative 9. And that term has a y, so you want to make sure we include it in our next line. And 6 over 6 is 1. Okay, so find the least common multiple. Then multiply every term, all three terms, by that value. And you should eliminate the fractions once you do that step. Now we want to have all the constants, all those numbers without variables on the right side. So we have this negative 3 here, so we want to add that value to both sides because it's negative. Negative 30 plus 3 is negative 27. We're multiplying y by negative 9. So our next step is to divide both sides by negative 9. And it's that step there that requires us to flip the inequality symbol because we divided both sides by a negative number. And negative 27 divided by negative 9 is positive 3. Fill in your number line. 3 is included, so it is a filled in circle at 3. All values less than, so we shade to the left. So least common multiple. Multiply every term by that value. Eliminate the fractions, and then solve like you normally would. So these take practice. So we have 2 more examples, and then I'll have you practice on your own. Okay, so first step, find the least common multiple of the denominators. In number 3, we only have 3 as a denominator, so we want to multiply every term by 3. Be careful not to lose x's where there are x's, and make sure you multiply every term by that value. X times 3 is 3x. 3 over 3 is 1. 3 over 3 is 1. Okay, so if you do that step correctly, your next step should have no more fractions. So now we want to combine like terms on the left side, 3x plus 10x. Remember, like terms are terms that have the same variable and the same exponent. So if both terms have an x, in order to combine them, we add the coefficients. We add 3 and 10 to get 13x. So now to the x term, we're subtracting 11. So we want to add 11 to both sides. And we're multiplying x by 13. So our last step is to divide by 13. Negative 26 divided by 13 is negative 2. So make sure your number line is increasing, meaning going from smallest to largest. Negative 2 is not included, so it would be open at negative 2. All values greater than, so we shade to the right. So far, all of these have come out to integer solutions, which is great, but it doesn't mean you can still get a fraction as your final answer. Know that most likely in the academic level, you'll have somewhat easier fractions like 1/2, 1/3, 5/3, 5/2, something that's easier to convert to a mixed number in order to be able to graph it. But the goal is to eliminate the fractions to make solving much easier for you. All right, last one here. So we want to find the least common multiple of the denominators. So we have 21 and 7. So 21 is a multiple of 7. So we want to use 21 as our least common multiple. Remember that trick, check the larger number and see if that's a multiple of the rest of the denominators. And if it is, then you don't need to look any further. Multiply every term by 21, even if it doesn't have a fraction. Be careful not to lose x's, right? So make sure that negative 2/7 has an x with it. Multiplying a fraction times the value of the denominator eliminates that denominator. X times 21 is 21x. 21 divided by 7 is 3 over 1. So negative 2x times 3 is negative 6x. And 1 times 21 is 21. So now we have variables on both sides. So it's definitely easier, especially when we have to go to graph, to keep the variables on the left side. So to do that, I'm looking at that negative 6x on the right side. I want to move it over, so I'm going to add it to both sides. I've noticed that those who aren't keeping the variables on the left side are not interpreting the solution correctly, and then in turn not graphing it correctly. So now our goal is to move the values without a variable to the right side. 46 is positive on the left, so we're going to subtract it from both sides. (21 minus 46 is negative 25. So this is an example we're not going to get an integer solution, but we are going to get an easy fraction to interpret. So our last step would be to divide both sides by negative 15. Remember, we need to flip the inequality symbol because we divided both sides by a negative number. And I want to simplify 25 over 15. They both are divisible by 5. We get 5/3. So to graph, 5/3 is equal to 1 2/3. So we can still use whole numbers on our number line. We can still use, let's put 0, 1, 2. 1 2/3 is going to be in between 1 and 2, closer to 2. And it's going to be filled in because it's equal to. And it's all values less than, so we shade to the left. Okay, so we're still working on multi-step inequalities, and we've moved towards having variables on both sides. This section is focusing on making it easier for you when there are fractions present. When there are fractions, find the least common multiple of the denominators, and then multiply every term by the value of the denominator. That should in turn eliminate all of the fractions and make it much easier for you to solve. So when we work on our practice assignment, please try this strategy and try to eliminate the fractions on our first step. So that's it for the notes on 2-4, day 3, multi-step inequalities with eliminating fractions.